Hi everyone. The center game begins e4, e5, d4. So I'm interested in learning this from the point of view of black, and so I found a game, Nepomniachtchi versus Carlsen from 2017. It was a Blitz game. Carlsen has the black pieces. Let's see how he handles this opening. E takes d4, queen takes d4. So black draws the queen to the center of the board and gains a tempo on it. The main line is to put the queen on e3. There are some old games where the queen goes to a5. But here the queen goes to e3. And it's actually quite stable on e3 for a while. Black can't directly attack it. Carlsen continued with bishop to b4 check, which was an unusual move. Knight c3, knight f6, bishop d2. I noticed in the database that this same position could arise from a different move order, where black plays knight to f6, then knight c3, then bishop b4, and bishop d2, the same position. The different move orders do make a difference. If you play knight to f6, for example, you have to be prepared for the move e5. If e5 is played, black has knight to g4 hitting the queen. And the queen can go either to e2 or e4. If it goes to e2, which I think is a mistake, black has a lead in development and should open up the position. Whenever you have a lead in development, that's the time to break lines open for your pieces. So an excellent move here is to play d6, so this bishop is defending the knight. Okay, and that looks a little suicidal at first glance because white can take the pawn with a discovered check, but black simply blocks it with his bishop, and then white is advised not to take the pawn on c7 and allow queen takes c7. That simply helps black's development, and black is ready to castle queenside, and he has a huge amount of compensation for his invested pawn. So white is probably simply lost in that position. Okay, anyway, Carlsen didn't play knight to f6, he played bishop b4 check. And so here he must be ready for the moves c3 or bishop d2. But Nepo played knight c3. Okay, then knight f6, bishop d2, and we've now transposed to the main line. Okay, black castles kingside, white castles queenside. Rook to e8, putting the rook in line with the white queen. And here, Nepo played an unusual move, queen to f4, the bottom move in the database. The main line is queen to g3, which just gives up a pawn here on e4, probably for a quick attack on the black king. There's pressure on the g7 square. This bishop might come to h6. The knight can get into the attack. The light squared bishop can get into the attack. However, the engine does like black here and gives the score of about -1. And the engine suggests knight takes e4 since that pawn is up for grabs. But the database overwhelmingly prefers rook takes e4. And here's the justification for the temporary exchange sacrifice. If white does take the rook, then black can take the knight and fork the queen and the bishop. So the queen has to move to safety, and it has to protect the bishop. So it goes to e3, then black takes the bishop with the bishop, forking the king and the queen, forcing the rook to take, and then black gets the exchange back. And after the queen takes the knight, d5 is a good move. And black has simply diffused the situation. White has no more attack here, doesn't have the bishop pair, there's no pressure on the black king, and black is simply a pawn up. White has no compensation. In fact, I would say black has the pawn and the compensation. Which is why after rook takes e4, white is advised not to capture the rook, but rather play a3 instead. Okay, well, then the bishop can fall back to d6 and attack the white queen. f4 can block the attack. Rook has to fall back now. And again, black is doing fine in this position. He has an extra pawn. The pawn on f4 seems to be blocking the dark squared bishop, so that might be a small success for black. I think that's better than the other line. Okay, anyway, queen to g3, which is the top move in the database, wasn't played in this game. Nepomniachtchi played queen to f4. I also noticed by looking at the top games in the database on Lichess that Nepomniachtchi played this same position as white at least 3 times in 2017. He lost to Carlsen, he lost to Anand, and he drew Aronian in this position with white. So not very successful. Okay, anyway, after queen f4, Carlsen removes the defender of the e4 pawn and then takes it with tempo. Now the queen falls back to g3, and then Carlsen plays d5, gets the pawn in the center of the board. So here the engine scores as -0.7. So black is up a pawn, but white does have some compensation. He has the bishop pair, and he may get an attack on the black king. Okay, so white plays f3, and Carlsen drops the rook all the way back, and then knight e2, probably heading for f4. And now a5. So black decides, I'm the one who wants to attack my opponent's king. He's going to push his a-pawn and try to attack on the queen side. Knight f4 comes, then knight b4. Excellent move, threatening knight takes a2 check, followed by knight takes c3. Okay, so Nepomniachtchi's response is bishop takes f6. Probably not the best response, but black really has the initiative in this position. The engine suggests instead of bishop takes f6, he can defend a2 with the move bishop to c4. Probably Nepomniachtchi didn't spot that move. The pawn is pinned. It was a blitz game after all. And then the score is about equal. Okay, but he plays bishop takes f6, and that brings the queen into the attack on white's king. Okay, then a3 threatens the knight, but Carlsen does not budge with the knight. He leaves it there. Can you guess Carlsen's move? Okay, Carlsen played bishop to f5, eyeing the c2 square. He reasons, go ahead, take my knight on b4. I'll recapture with my a-pawn and open the a-file for my rook. My rook can get to a1. Your king is in a lot of danger. Okay, not to mention I'm threatening to take on c2. All right, but nevertheless, Nepomniachtchi in a bad spot takes the knight anyway, which is a blunder, and then Carlsen opens the a-file. All right, and then knight takes d5 was played, giving Carlsen the check on a1. You may wonder what happens if the king goes to b1 to guard a1. Well, Carlsen can play rook to a1 check anyway, because after king takes rook, there's the excellent move bishop takes c2. Do you see the threat? So that takes away the b1 square, and the unstoppable threat is rook to a8. That would be a quick mate down the a-file. And there is no defense. The engine says this is a mate in 4. So king to b1 doesn't work, but nothing really does. So Nepo plays knight takes d5, and the game continued rook to a1 check, flushes the king out to d2, and then queen takes b2. Now you can see this earlier move, bishop to f5, was an excellent choice because it is participating in the attack. Black is threatening a mate here on c2. Queen takes c2 would be mate. So Nepomniachtchi tries queen takes c7 to defend that point. There really was no defense, but now there's a mate in 3. Carlsen plays rook takes d1 check, and Nepo resigns. So he resigns because king takes rook would lose to queen to b1 check, king to d2 is forced, and then queen to e1 would be mate. All right, so I learned a lot about how to play the black side against the center game. I hope you did too. Thanks for watching the video.